Good afternoon, good morning, industry friends, guest speakers. Welcome to the second edition of the Greentech Masters, an edition where we host leaders from the region. And in today's session, a very inspiring movement or preview on the future of the agri-food industry in Southeast Asia. On behalf of the ADCN and all Dutch Chambers of Commerce in Southeast Asia, I would like to welcome you to this session. And without further ado, we'd like to kick off by thanking all of the industry network in our region from all chambers and executive directors for making Greentech Masters possible. It's simply because of bridging knowledge and leadership through the region to make the right decisions into the future for your members, your businesses, and adapt as one of the most innovative industries in our region. And I would like to welcome more and more green tech initiatives from leaders across the world to share their vision and trends ahead of us. This session will be also recorded and can be reviewed online, and the links will be sent to you per email for your colleagues to look into. My name is Manuel. I am the chair for the Greentech Masters for the upcoming 2 years. And the Greentech Masters also featured a great interview last time with the Equilibrium Group head grower, Gottfried Doll, which was also awarded for sharing greenhouses that are feasible in tropical climates with a lot of renewable aspects. This was a very interesting session. We had a lot of questions. And today's session will be a bit more wider than particularly on greenhouses in tropical climates. Today's session will focus on investments. And recently, a nice report was published, made possible by Temasek, by PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the Rabobank. And in this report, the next big shift was announced for the agri-food industry in Asia. The next big shift also means a lot of behavioral changes. And the road ahead of us will impact a lot of us and also will draw a lot of global investment to our region, in which for today's session, we could learn from two speakers, Mathys Boeren, CEO of Asia Sustainable Food Platform, and Wei Chu, Director of Temasek International. Gentlemen, thank you for being here with us. I hope you both are doing well.
Hey, morning everyone. Manuel, could you help to unmute Matthias? I think he's...
Mute what?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Wei, you're in the United States. You're at the moment at a conference. Thank you for being here with us, Wei. You'll be sharing us some insights today on the report of Asian Food Challenge. And Mathys Boeren, the CEO of Asian Sustainable Food Platforms, which has recently been appointed, I think 6-7 months ago, to lead a great initiative on new investments in Southeast Asia. Maybe it's good for Wei. Could you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Happy to. Let me start. So yeah, good morning, good afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me to join this interview. So I'm a director with Temasek's Agri-Food Investment Team, and we look at kind of investment opportunities across the entire supply chain. So conceptually from farm to fork, and I think we've been going at this pretty strongly for the last decade. And it's really interesting to see how things has really the landscape has evolved very meaningfully in the last 5 years with lots of new innovation. A lot of it is driven by the new Asian consumer trends, which I think we'll get into more detail. But yeah, I mean, happy to be here and looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Wei. Thank you. And then we have Mathys Boeren. Mathys is the CEO of the ASEAN Sustainable Food Platform. Hi, Mathys. Would you care briefly to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Mathys Boeren. I've worked in the food and food ingredients industry for close to 30 years. I've worked for companies like Unilever, Givaudan, Sunrise, Kerry Ingredients, and then more recently for Temasek, leading the Asia Sustainable Foods Platform, which is fairly new. And it is our mission to accelerate the commercialization of sustainable food products across Asia. So we're looking to help companies, not necessarily Asian companies alone, but global companies that are looking to launch their products, sustainable products within Asia.
Thank you, Mathys. So both of you working for Temasek, and in the report that we will be reviewing and asking questions about, we see a lot of investments being put into Southeast Asia in the next decade. Temasek today is already invested for $8 billion in the agri-food globally. Is that correct, Wei?
Yes, that's right.
So we'll be touching base upon a really great report, which I would encourage many of our members to read through. And it also touches base on the new trends and the road ahead of us in Southeast Asia, one of the new thriving regions in the world. The report really has a executive summary where it shares the investments being put into the behavioral changes of consumers, healthier diets, fresh food, and how we make our new choices to a new phase. It also shows upstream where the food will be coming from and what is driven by the industry towards that point. It shows also geographically in which areas of the world of Southeast Asia we can see some changes and what kind of appetite there will be. But without further ado, I would like to firstly touch base upon the first important question, Wei, and this will be targeted to you. If we look ahead of us, the next 2000 to 2030, the years ahead of us, reading through your report, we will be all kind of adapting to a new diet or a new way of consuming. Where would we be by 2030?
Right. I'm happy to start, and then I'll let Mathys add on. I think from 2030, I guess it's not that far away. Right, we're in 2022, and we know that in the food supply chain, like all these things, everything takes time. If you want to make changes to upstream, if you're making changes to the supply chain, you're making changes to manufacturing side. So we are not that far away from 2030. But we do think that, at least for we do think that the most meaningful trends or shifts that's going to happen in the coming 5 to 8 years is twofold. The first being a stronger uptake in health and wellness trend, and the second one is around the themes of sustainability. So on this entire like health and wellness thing, we believe that consumers would make more active choices in terms of products that's better for them. So this could be things that have more nutrition, or this could be things that have, say less things like less salt, less sugar, less fat and stuff. So it could be things that have more nutrition, more ingredients that's better for you, or less, for things that seemingly have negative health consequences. And on the sustainability front, I guess is, we are hoping, or we would like to think that with the multiple efforts from the food companies, consumers will be encouraged to pick products that's better for the environment. It's not something that is, as widely adopted in our part of the world, in Asia, versus kind of what we've seen in US and Europe. But we think that, as the upstream suppliers put their effort into it, as the retailer and the food service guys kind of put in more resources to that, then, I think as consumers, when we get educated, we do hope that, people will end up making choices that are better for the environment. So, those two are the key things that we think about.
Yeah, yes, Wei. It's very interesting also to read that it's also expected that some countries will be adopting to a vegetarian diet. I even have a nephew that is a couple of years old, and he's already becoming a vegan at that young age. So this, come to think of it, in the next generation, that there will be a lot of new shifts, and traditional thinking would be set aside. How much, would we really in Southeast Asia consume more plant-based products in the years to come?
Maybe I'll comment on that. I think what's really exciting, or what history has shown us time and time again, is that we have to present consumers with products that don't disappoint, and hopefully products that even excite. And triggered by your point around plant-based products, I think plant-based alternatives have been around for a long, long time. But to my experience in all my years in the industry, they didn't really excite. They weren't really able to mimic the original. And I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is a range of technologies coming online and being perfected that allow us to make products that don't disappoint. And that is really, really very exciting. And I think we as an industry have a job to present consumers indeed with those products that don't disappoint, because if they now go and look for them, which they do, they are triggered by different initiatives. If they now go and look for them and we disappoint them, they might not come back. So it's really up to us to accelerate the industry.
And thank you, Mathys. But apart from plant-based products, would you think also we will be eating insects, and would you also see that we will be looking into crops that have less pesticides, for example? How would you segmentize that business scope?
Okay. I think there's a number of elements, or a number of reasons why people choose a food. Taste, first and foremost. Texture is part of it. Nutrition, affordability, and sustainability. Those 5 are of paramount importance, but it's a compromise between. You can't have it all, and I think we will become much better at delivering better and better products, specifically on the insect one, if it gives a protein source that adds to the nutrition, and if the taste is acceptable. I believe more and more consumers will overcome perhaps the initial hesitation to consume insects. So it's a compromise of those 5 elements, but I do believe we will go down that direction. But first, perhaps indirect. We may feed them to the fish first, and we will upcycle the protein, and we will eat the fish.
Yeah, we see that trends now also, I think in Vietnam and also in other countries in Southeast Asia, developing the black soldier fly for the livestock industry, and indirectly a consumption. But if you were, and also a very nice point in the report, if you were to define, the behavioral changes that our new generation will adopt to, would they be more making choices sustainably, or more rather from a nutritional point of view? Mathys.
Okay. I think there's the 3 pillars. It's why people choose certain products. From a personal belief, is it better for the planet? Is it better for the animal? Is it better for me? And I think more and more people have become conscious of that, but we don't all have the same reasoning for it. But there is no doubt that, and perhaps even accelerated by Corona, that more and more people are looking at not just what's in it for me, but looking at a broader spectrum of reasons. And it could be all of the above.
Okay. And talking about the new generation, and maybe feel free to jump in here. At what age, or what group of target group, what age would you see the first changes? I assume like the traditional Southeast Asian, they really love meat, so they would not like to decline a nice plate of pork or any traditional dish. Where do you see this evolving and picking up?
Yeah, So I think from our perspective, right, I think it's really kind of the group of people like us that's on the call today that's ultimately still directing where money is being channeled, right? In terms of what food products are they buying. Yes, I think the younger generation are born in a slightly different era. They're exposed to different things from what we are growing up, but in many cases, right, the parents are kind of dictating what goes into the lunchbox for our kids at this moment. So I think a lot of the innovations that, at least from our end, when we think about who could be potential winners in these trends, I think it's companies that's targeting, I guess, the working people in the working group, as opposed to, like youths or kind of the elderly for that matter. And I think, so for example, one of the companies we recently invested in is a company that makes ice cream. Right, ice cream, I guess by the sound of it, is a dessert. I think we know that people have been deliberately cutting down calories, reducing sugar, and things like that. But Nix, through their kind of like proprietary formulation, one tub of Nix ice cream, the entire tub is 300 calories. Right, so I think if we do innovations like that, I think that helps consumers to evolve their diet to something that's healthier for them, but not exactly making a ton of compromises. And the same thing on kind of like on fruits and vegetables, we are probably one of a significant amount of investments in advanced breeding. We do think that you can end up breeding for plants that either taste better, packs more nutrition, and effectively you might be eating the same salad bowl, but the actual intake, right, that you're taking in could be much better for you. And you could also be something, a plant that's more disease tolerant, heat tolerant, that ends up being better for the environment as well, because that plays into the entire production cycle. So I think we are trying to innovate not so much on bringing new product categories to market, but how do we make existing products, right, give it a slight twist and make it better.
Yeah, good point. And I would like to continue on that discussion, and maybe we can go to Mathys Boeren, because if we look at the supermarkets today, you could either choose to pay non-premium or premium for, let's say, a nice vegetable, a capsicum or a cucumber. The price difference is substantial, and looking at the current cost prices increases to also the Eastern Russia and Ukraine situation, at what point would we consider to pay premium? Or do you see still a huge group paying for the traditional crop as cheap as possible? Or would we increase our awareness? Mathys.
Thank you. I don't think it has changed recently. Over the years, if there is a true benefit to the consumer, whether it's a true benefit or a perceived benefit to the consumer, they will pay for the premium. And I think if we look at history of what's a healthy product, if we go back 20 years, a healthy product, we called it health minus. It was taking stuff out of the product that wasn't good for you. Think salt, sugar, and fat, or at least we had scientifically proven that wasn't good for you. So 20 years ago, a healthy product was a light product, a health minus. Today, over the years, we actually did health plus. We started to add ingredients that have been scientifically proven to be good for us. Think the addition of vitamins or certain extracts. Then later on, we wanted it both, right? So we wanted less sugar, salt, and fat, and we wanted the ingredients, and that was the perceived health, or not healthy, a higher value product. And now we've reached the point where it's not just about taking the bad stuff out, putting good stuff in, but also what does it mean for, and I'll come back to those points, the planet and the animals. And if you hit on all of those cylinders, if you bring that value to the product, history has shown us that consumers are willing to pay for it, but it has shifted. What was good enough 20 years ago isn't good enough anymore. People will look at the label, they will study it carefully, and they, based on that, will decide, is this actually a valuable product?
Yeah, interesting. How much more would we pay? What would be the price difference or the gap, Mathys? Would it be 20%, 30% more for a premium, or?
I think that's a very broad question. I think if you do the health plus and you have for a while we saw that if you start putting probiotics into a product, we paid a considerable premium. We were 30% or so higher, but now it almost has become the norm. I think when there is when the label is, for instance, cleaner or perceived cleaner than the label of other products, there could be easily a 10-15% premium to be expected to be paid.
Yeah.
And if you, yeah.
On this topic on premiumization, at least when we think about it, a lot of times these products are at a premium today because they are kind of like at the earlier stages of adoption. So and kind of constrained by manufacturing scale. Unfortunately, the cost of production requires a premium price to sustain that business. But everything that we looked at, right? End of the day, I think food needs to be affordable and accessible. I think Mathys mentioned it earlier. All these companies, because they are technology, they have a strong technology orientation. We do believe that eventually, like products that's better for you, better for the environment, doesn't necessarily need to be priced at a premium for these businesses to survive. And I think that's when we reach a bit of a tipping point, if you will. But so I think the premiumization is required at this point in time, given that it's a new sector of sorts that's being kind of like built up. But over time, I do think that you'll become fairly competitive. Yeah. And then if you think about the traditional side, which today is seen as a lower cost alternative, but because of the say production methods, the supply chain, food safety aspect of things, if you layer on those, call it cost, that's not true cost that's reflected in the P&L, then again those things might be perceived as more expensive down the road versus the newer innovations.
Yeah. So we will eventually all pay a bit more for a better product, as I can conclude from you both. If you look to the current businesses, I think some of the businesses would like to stay traditional, and they rather would not jump on this boat to create new sustainable products or products with better nutritional value. Would you predict these businesses will still be existing in 10 to 15 years, or would they have to adapt to serving the new generation?
Well, it's a difficult one, but there's I guess it's a bad analogy to food. But I mean, if you think about tobacco companies, at one point in time, the health effects of tobacco wasn't widely known, and the proliferation of tobacco around the world was very prominent. Even when I was a kid, I think I lived through that, and within the last 15 years, like meaningful shifts has happened, right? Because I think it's widely spoke about. Regulations actually came in a big way. So I stay in Singapore. I think now kind of like in public areas, kind of like smoking is either deterred or banned, and all those things create kind of like big changes, right? And from food, so if you bring it back to food, I think kind of if the price of water or the price of carbon is kind of like being priced and on a global basis, I think all those things will have create very meaningful shifts that almost happens overnight. But absent those shifts, then I think it'll be a more, I guess, slower pace of transition. But definitely, I think the transition is going to happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Wei. Back to you, Mathys. I saw on the website you're very oriented in alternative proteins, plant-based products. If you look at the chasm and how to cross that chasm to become more adopted by the majority, having them consume more plant-based product. Sorry for maybe it's kind of a challenging question, but what would that chasm be? When are we all going to eat more plant-based, or are we already crossing it right now?
I think, and that's the point I drove before, but it's also my history from the flavors industry, and to make products that don't disappoint. That's where it first starts. And today we see promising. Promising is not fair. Look at the Impossible Burger. In my humble opinion, I believe that the Impossible Burger doesn't disappoint. It excites. It's truly a product that is mimicking the original. We see interesting chicken nugget products. But if that's all we do, and now answering your question, if that's all we do, you just make a burger or a chicken nugget, we're not going to win over the mass consumer. We need to have a wide variety of plant-based alternatives, or if you wish, sustainable alternatives. That is the only way to excite the consumer. Otherwise, they will get bored really quickly. And let's be honest, the consumer today is spoiled for choice. Just as last week, I was at Future Food Tech, visited a number of massive supermarkets in the US. The choice there is staggering. It is phenomenal. All those different products are there. It's actually difficult to see the differences among them. But it will be extremely important we bring that to Asia as well, that there is choice and that there is a wide variety of products. So availability at scale for a wide variety of products, that's what will make the difference.
Yeah, interesting. I hope to see that in the future. I think Southeast Asia with its demographics, psychographics, we have a huge potential. And I think everybody waits for that turning point in their community or in their market to have more plant-based variety in the offer. And I would like to continue to one of the next questions, and maybe Wei, feel also free, because I think this is a topic you are maybe comfortable talking about, is indoor growing, indoor farming, vertical farming in cities. We have seen also in Singapore and the 30-30 mission that we are on right now, that a lot of crops of, more crops are being grown in indoor growing facilities and greenhouses in and around cities. How do you see this development continue in Southeast Asia? Will it stay in Singapore, and will it go to other cities too?
Well, I guess across Southeast Asia, so it definitely has the potential to be replicated outside of Singapore, but I'll say the caveat being that all these companies need to demonstrate production cost that's competitive with kind of traditional production methods. And because, unfortunately, I think across Southeast Asia, most of these countries have have significant kind of arable land. They do have in-country production. So for the vertical farms to gain real market share, they just need to be cost competitive. And I think which is what we've seen all these companies do, right? They pick one or two of these tier 1 cities, they launch pilots, they prove out the technology. And once they have a blueprint in mind that allows them to scale at a cost efficient level, then they start expanding so-called, closer towards the heartlands. And we think that this is one of the ways that things could go towards. But unfortunately, I think, I guess Southeast Asia is probably more challenging than US, for example, just given kind of the consumer's willingness to pay at this point in time. And, one of the points on current macro, I think, unfortunately, high energy prices is not going to help the pace of acceleration for vertical farms. So we think it still has a lot of potential, just that, it takes some time to get there.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of farms in Singapore, more and more every year, and they're currently they're developing strawberries indoor, of course, leafy greens. Would you see more of these niches in the coming years, or would you see that it kind of, because of the energy prices, kind of flattens a little bit in its growth curve? What can we see in the next few years in Singapore on this mission?
Yeah, so I think the company that we invested in, Sustainable in Singapore, I mean, arguably they are playing in a niche segment with kale, right, which is kind of a bit of a superfood, but it's not a big part of, say, the Asian diet today. And so I think that's a way to kind of get a product that has a slightly higher premium into the market and allows us to kind of prove out the technology behind that. And I think in US, our investee company, Boeren, recently launched a strawberry product. So I think, yes, I think all those things would happen. But ultimately, for vertical farms to truly so-called gain market share, like Mathys said, they need to prove that they are affordable, or I guess affordable and affordable and accessible at scale, right? I think the scaling part is important, and so by definition, like niche products, it's a bit difficult to get the scale that you need.
Yeah, that's a good point, Wei. So if you look to Southeast Asia, we're home to one of the biggest regions for cities to evolve, and cities obviously will be challenged by energy prices, being renewable. Obviously Singapore is well ahead of its mission, and the culture is changing towards growing. What other cities or countries would you expect to follow in that food trend?
Food trend from a vertical farming perspective, or just general kind of like
indoor farming perspective?
So indoor farming, we definitely think so. I think the countries that are, I guess close proxies to Singapore, we definitely think Japan is one of those that's, at the leading edge of that. We do think, again, like places like Korea, I think that makes sense to us too. I mean, people don't talk about it a lot, but we do think that, in places like Australia, right, where labor cost is extremely high, and kind of like, per capita income is relatively high too, like there should be opportunities there. And even parts of China, right? I think China, I think the angle will be more along kind of like food safety, premiumized products, maybe niche categories, that kind of, I mean, it's just a big enough consumer base when even a niche category offers you some significant scale. Yeah.
Maybe I'll add a comment to that. If you have a really high value ingredient, it might help, for instance, like menthol or patchouli oil. These are ingredients that are used in the food ingredients in the flavors industry. And it is more and more difficult to get these ingredients naturally from nature, from Mother Earth. There is just not enough of it. And because the consumer's attitude or perception of artificial is so negative, in the mind of the consumer, natural almost equates to healthy, and artificial definitely equates to unhealthy. And so there is a really large industry that is pursuing other ways of making these ingredients in a natural way, because once it's artificial, the consumers will walk away. And I believe that will help develop the tech for indoor farming further. It's very niche, it's high value, and there is a demand for it today.
Good point, Mathys, thanks. And if we would extend that discussion towards greenhouses, then you have a well-balanced, because most people predict that there will be 20%, 30% indoor farms at max, to balance the conventional, the premium crops such as capsicums, cucumbers, tomatoes, with very less pesticide, insecticides. Do you think that balance that we see in the United States and in Europe, where predominantly greenhouses will have a larger piece in the food production supply, the same as in Asia? I wonder whether we are having a different growing strategy in the region, or we are following what happened elsewhere.
Yeah, so I mean, so from our perspective, I think in this entire, I guess, area of like protected cropping versus open field, so I think obviously I think consumer acceptance is one, right? Like, would they kind of ascribe a premium to a greenhouse produce? And I think in places like US and Europe, they've proven that in Asia there's a bit of more work that needs to be done to educate the consumers. But putting aside consumer preferences, there's two other things, right, that could significantly change the pace of adoption from a protected cropping perspective. One being regulation. I think what we've seen is that if the government comes out with extremely strict regulations on, can you fumigate the soil? What kind of chemicals can you actually apply? I mean, that almost makes, changes the way the farmers needs to behave, right? As in, you need to kind of like completely revamp your past farming practices to adopt to that. And I think in UK, we've seen some of that. Or the other thing is it could be just like, like on climate change, right? I mean, the more open field you're susceptible to weather risk, you might be hit with a big rain, you might be hit with a drought this year, that next year. And all those things we would think these things change the perception of risk in terms of open field farming. And once they do that, that should kind of like incentivize or catalyze the growers to think more about putting in capital to develop the kind of, I guess, protected cropping infrastructure that they need. And, last week, like, or last time when you guys interviewed, you guys know that with financial players like Equilibrium that's looking to provide capital to the space. So if the farmer feels like there is a need for this, at the same time, there's a financing solution available that enables him to do it, then I think all these things will happen together quite naturally. But, you can't do without the other.
Yeah. I think it's, thank you, Wei. I think it's the upcoming decade as described in the Asian Food Challenge is going to be a very interesting one. And of course, it's going to inspire also a lot of new entrepreneurs coming into the business. And recently in Singapore, you see a lot of new people coming into the industry to become a grower or a business entrepreneur for fresh produce. And you see initiatives like that were inspired by Gotham Greens in America, also having rooftop farms and new kind of way of farming within cities. I think this is a very nice trend that people are coming into the industry. An open question to Mathys and Wei. The smallholders are in decline, and we all know that. Do you think more and more people will come to the industry from a different background to balance that decline, or would it be going more in automation in the future?
Maybe I'll take it first. I definitely believe that automation is the way forward, right? I think in the past, I don't know, like if we dial it back a few hundred years ago, like maybe a quarter of the population on Earth is kind of like involved in farming, and today I think it's a much lower percentage. I think that trend will continue. I think as you apply automation, the farms are becoming more efficient. You're putting more money into the hands of the farmers, and that also kind of like uplifts like livelihood. So when we invested in technologies that improve supply chains, that puts kind of like digital tools or even sometimes like hardware tools like drones into the hands of smallholder farmers, that allows them to run a more efficient practice. And we think we definitely think that this is the right trend as to where things would ultimately evolve towards, right? So we definitely think that automation is something that will continue. Yeah.
I believe that drastically new technologies in this field will bring different people to the market. I think we're seeing so much change in the food industry, whether it is precision fermentation that's being used, or whether it is and then blended product with other crops. When those new technologies are being developed as we speak, that will bring a new, for lack of a better word, breed of people to the market that will start marketing those products. So a bit of both.
Yeah, interesting. I really enjoy seeing these developments, and just by sharing the potential and the possibilities that people could do to grow a very nice crop and tell a great story about that crop that has been grown, for example, in a city or around a restaurant. And I would like to touch base upon the next question. And I think this is a very good point that we all have seen around us, is the direct to consumer channel, where supermarkets are being kind of a bit disrupted by the offer going directly to the demand to e-commerce. What do you see, Mathys, in Southeast Asia? Will we see more of these initiatives, and what will happen eventually to supermarkets?
Ooh, two very different questions. I definitely see more and more direct to consumer, and there are some really interesting platforms being developed that are facilitating that, and that make the cost of distribution less of a hurdle. And I believe if they get traction like that with new products initially, the transition to supermarkets might not happen. It is still where the largest volume is being sold, but it's clearly easier to go direct to consumers. The hurdles are far lower. However, the distribution cost can sometimes still be a bit of an issue if you don't want to pay the 30% commission.
Yeah. And so would you think like supermarkets will eventually adapt to the same quality level, or would they, be disrupted by more and more businesses going this way, direct to consumer?
I'll do a bit of a cop-out answer on this one. I am convinced they will be disrupted. What it will look like, I find difficult to define, but the speed with which direct to consumer is developing and the growth of those channels and the ease of doing business with them, that rate is so high, there is no doubt that the traditional supermarket will be disrupted. But then what will it look like? I wish I knew.
Yeah. And Mathys, step further in Southeast Asia, where do you see, like obviously in Singapore, but also elsewhere, I read India and Indonesia also going direct to consumer quite progressively, correct?
Correct. I think it's globally, right? Almost it's but I slightly different, but again, last week, talking to many startups in the sustainable food space. And when they speak about launching products, it's small volume, it is all using the direct to consumer, using digital platforms. Some of them go as far, which I wouldn't recommend, by setting up their own platform. But really, most of them are not looking initially to the supermarket. And I don't think they would have a chance on getting any shelf space.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think supermarkets will have more an open mind in the future instead of buying on costs, but buying on quality and, having less commission or less margin?
Yeah.
Would that be a potential for them, or?
I think there will be everybody who starts to lose, first of all, in the growth percentage and subsequently in market share, will have a more open mind. That we will all adapt to changes. So yes, they will do so. But I definitely think it will look very different as soon as 5 years from now.
Yeah. Okay, that's a an important call for change if you're in the supermarket chain. General recommendations, Mathys, that you would have today for peers in the industry, either that's in the plant-based environment or the indoor growing greenhouse development in Southeast Asia or in Asia. What would your key 2 lessons be to fellow investors, for example?
Let me focus on, because that's where we're really active, let me focus on plant-based products and combinations of those or hybrid products. I think what is, and I'll come back to the point that I think I started with during this call, look out for products that are really good, that don't disappoint. And we shouldn't believe our own taste buds or the opinion of the founding fathers of the company. But let's do some tests in the market, because sometimes it really can be surprising how consumers respond to a new product, and how good we think it is and how bad the consumer thinks it is. So I think we need to make sure, and I mentioned that point as well, that we don't scare the consumers away of these new products, that they try it once, they are disappointed, and we don't see them back for quite some time. So if there's one piece of advice I could give, check what the market is looking for.
Yeah. And in terms of price, Mathys, I think plant-based products are also price premium in the market. Yeah. So there is a barrier. Wouldn't it be easier for them to, to have an easy penetration rate where such purchases are at lower level?
Yeah, and I think it's always easier. You always get a better penetration when the prices are better. However, the speed with which these technologies are advancing, I am convinced that we are going to see price parity with the products that we are replacing. That's going to be different for different markets, for different countries, for different product categories. How quick the adoption will be. If you're in a country where the concern is, will I be able to feed my family tonight? Then people will probably not be contemplating, oh, can I buy a more expensive, more sustainable alternative? But the speed with which these technologies are evolving, I am convinced we will see these prices going down. And that's all about scale. So access at scale will bring that down.
Wei, anything you can add?
Well, I definitely think that partnering the Asian Sustainable Foods Platform would improve the chance of success.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, so Temasek is one of the major investors globally, right? So you'll make a lot more investments in the food environment. What else could you share upcoming in Southeast Asia is a big focus for Temasek?
So I think we are one of the focus areas it's not so much about food, but I think it's about how food is handled in the supply chain. I think if we look across Southeast Asia and we compare again, with US and Europe, we do think that our supply chain has a lot of room to improve. And I think it could be obviously in places like Singapore. I think it's pretty well established, functioning cold chains and things like that. But if we look a bit further away at Indonesia, if we look a bit at India, I think the amount of food loss in the supply chain is something that's quite shocking. And I think that also plays into kind of like food safety and food quality. I mean, again, the best quality product, if not handled in the right way, when it reaches the hand of consumer, right, you will not get the right kind of like consumer experience. So from our perspective, I think all these supply chain plays are a fairly interesting enabling player in this entire evolution. And we are continuously kind of looking out for new players who's looking to digitize the traditional, I guess, brick and mortar food supply chain. Be it is for food products, be it is for crops, it could be for proteins, but broadly speaking, supply chain plays.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Wei. I think we've touched base on a lot of subjects. I might have a few other questions, but also we have a small audience today compared to last time. I would like to involve audience to share a question or two. We have 8 minutes to cover. Before we kick off with obtaining questions, any last note from Wei and Mathys on where we are by 2:30 in terms of sharing a scope of crops and plant-based environments? For instance, would we be consuming 50 or 60% of our diets plant-based, and we will really source our products based on whether pesticides are used or something similar? What is your last take that you would see us by 2:30?
I guess, okay, so I'll start. And this is my personal view, right? I'm a bit more traditional in that perspective. So if I apply, myself, my immediate kind of like family and friends, I actually don't think our, what we put on the plate is going to look very meaningfully different today versus 2030. But I think, in terms of types of cuisines, the kind of food that we go for, but I think, like we were saying, some of the underlying product that goes into it could be different, right? I might be having the same, fried fish fingers, but it might be coming from growth farm instead of coming from a traditional like fish fillet and things like that. So I think from my expectation is that as a consumer, a lot of my preferences would be relatively kept intact, but I think I will have high graded or migrated to a better for you kind of like diet because of the better products that's being developed.
All right. You mentioned 20, 30%. No, we will not be there. I think if we get 1, 2, maybe 3% replacement of the existing proteins that we're consuming today, that will already be an enormous amount. Looking at the tech that is needed to produce this, the industry that we need to build to make that all, that would be great. So I'm an order of magnitude different. A couple of percent will already mean a lot.
Thank you, Mathys, and thank you, Wei. I'll wait if there are any few questions and see if any of the audience has a particular question in these spaces. I would like to ask everyone or consider to read the report of the Asian Food Challenge that we have touched a base upon. As you can see, it's a wide report. It shares the future of where we are and where investments will be made, focused regions in the world, and a lot of exciting trends ahead of us. If there are no other questions, I would like to conclude this session. And thank you for being here with us, particularly Wei and Mathys, and Wei calling in at 3 a.m. in the morning or 4 a.m. in the morning in the United States. So much appreciated for the dedication. Mathys, thanks again for your time and sharing your views. And therefore, I would like to ask everyone to read the email that will be sent out for recordings and sharing sessions. Thank you everyone for joining. This was today's Greentech Masters, and we'll see you again in 8 weeks.
All right, thanks everyone. Yes. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone.